She saved the world and defeated the Demon King. But her fiancé cheated on her right before their wedding. So she ran away from the kingdom, and the hero who traveled with her decided to stay by her side. And that's where the story begins. In the throne room, a little girl in a blue dress with short black hair stands before the old king, and behind her stands a woman in modest clothing. The king tells the girl, named Reishii, that her power is too great and cannot remain unchecked. Therefore, holding her hand, he uses magic to mark the back of her palm with a symbol. This clearly causes the girl pain. She closes her eyes and cries out, so the woman behind her prevents her from pulling away prematurely by placing her hands on her fragile shoulders. The king says that this symbol is proof of Reishii's contract, that she must devote her life to the country. The child agrees to this. Several years later, a flock of wyverns soars in the sky. One of the squad members, Brooks, notices them. He reports this to the hero, Wayne. Wayne orders the squad to focus on the black hound they have been fighting, while he watches the enemies in the sky. The lizards are too high up, so he orders Reishii, who is nearby and hiding under the hood of her cloak, to strike them with lightning. But not too hard. The grown girl flinches slightly at the guy's shout, but then she recites a spell, strikes the ground with her staff, right in the center of the magic circle that has appeared, and a similar circle appears in the sky, but larger. A pillar of magic bursts from the center of the circle, instantly destroying all the wyverns. Brooks is delighted. Dana from the squad asks Reishii if she is all right. She receives an affirmative answer. Wayne is stunned. The power of the Witch of Dawn, as he calls Reishii, staring wide-eyed at her figure in the smoke from the spell. A year later, Kuroiza Kingdom, capital city. Reishii makes her way through the crowd of townspeople, slightly hunched over, pulling the hood of her cloak over her head and clutching tightly to her staff, which is curved at the end and decorated with intertwined ribbon. The girl notices such a large number of people, as if it were some kind of holiday. On the way, she awkwardly bumps into a passerby, is almost knocked over by running children with a small dog, and steps on the tail of a young witch's resting cat. Reishii is about to go home to do some magical research. She is startled by a loud voice asking for the Witch of Dawn. She turns around at the sound. The girl calms down, realizing that it is just a crowd gathered around an artist, asking him for the paintings they want. The man is selling paintings depicting members of the hero's team. Watching this, the girl thinks about how much excitement there is for these images, and also that it really is a celebration. Reishii is lost in memories of how the Demon King was revived 10 years ago. Because of this, monsters flooded the world and ravaged the land. This dangerous opponent was defeated a month ago by a squad from the kingdom of Kuroizu, which included the hero Wayne, who was chosen as the Sacred Sword, the Steel Warrior Brooks, and the Saint Dana. And Reishii herself, who was called the Witch of Dawn. She almost never appeared in public, so her appearance was imagined by people and did not resemble Reishii herself at all. For example, everyone believed that she had scarlet hair and was incredibly beautiful. This plays into the girl's hands, as she can calmly go out into the city and not even be noticed. On her way home, the girl thinks about the fact that there is no point in conducting magical research now that the Demon King has been defeated. After all, she is bound by contract to the kingdom, and her only goal was to destroy the enemy. Now, on leave until her next orders, she doesn't know what to do with herself. Having already turned her back on the crowd with thoughts of returning home, Reishii hears the artist exclaim that there are only a couple of portraits left. So she turns around and buys 4 engravings for herself. The girl looks very happy and hugs her purchases, thinking that sometimes you can treat yourself because she rarely buys anything for herself. Although it was not easy for her because the witch is shy around people, so she trembled as she handed the payment to the artist. Walking through the busy streets of the city, Reishii looks at the paintings she bought, thinking about her former comrades in arms. She realizes that they will not get together anytime soon because they are heroes. She also wonders if Dana and Brooks made it home because they are probably celebrating there too. A smile appears on the mage's face. The girl recalls a moment from one of their stops when she and Wayne watched Dana and Brooks have a small argument. She joined them on orders, but the Witch of Dawn admits that that time was charming in its own way. The girl admits that she misses those times, even if she is the only one who does. However, she is still overcome with some anxiety, wondering if she will be recognized. She is depicted differently in all the paintings. The witch is interrupted from her thoughts by someone calling out to her to watch her step, lest she fall. Looking up from the paintings, Reishii sees Wayne standing in front of her. The guy smiles at her and greets her. His expression changes almost immediately. He points out her friend's pallor, suggesting that she has forgotten to eat again. The girl does not give a clear answer. The action moves to a park with a fountain, where children are playing, townspeople are strolling, and the tower of a large building is visible through the treetops. Lacey eats her sandwich carefully, while she and Wayne are sitting on a bench. The guy watches the girl eat, saying that she should eat slowly, to which she gives a short agreement. The guy also asks why the girl bought paintings of their team. She replies that it was just nostalgia, and also informs him that Dana and Brooks have already left the capital. While Wayne looks at the paintings, Lacey says that his portrait is now the most popular, but this does not interest her companion much. In turn, he asks why the Dawn, which has once again been painted looking completely different from the real thing. But after thinking about it, he decides that maybe it's better this way. Lacey is a little upset, as she decides that the guy thinks the paintings wouldn't sell as well with her real face, but he objects, saying that it's better for her to live that way. After all, Wayne himself is too recognizable and cannot leave the house without using the magic of disguise. That is, an illusion that makes his face inconspicuous, but does not work on those whose magic is stronger, including Lacey. He also says that he cannot use it at official receptions, so everyone stares at him there. The young man adds that such attention was tolerable on missions, but receptions at the castle are a nightmare. The girl agrees with this, continuing to eat. After all, he is a former hero and a nobleman at that, so he always has a lot of work to do. These thoughts make the witch wonder why he is here at all. She concludes that it must be for business. She asks him directly, looking at Wayne, and he replies that he heard Lacey dismiss the servants and sold the house. This makes him worry whether she is alive. The goddess looks slightly concerned. He says that if she is left alone, she will forget to eat and sleep while practicing her magic, and that he has come to understand this well during his travels. That a witch can easily kill herself without proper supervision. Lacey tries to argue, but she stumbles and turns away, knowing that her friend is right. The girl remembers how Wayne took care of her during the journey, and she assumes that if she had a mother, she would be like Wayne. At least, that's what she thinks. A slight smile touches her lips at these thoughts, and a slight blush appears on her cheeks. While she is lost in thought, the young man offers to buy her something else to eat and examines her slightly tousled, tangled hair, in which he finds crumbs, saying, more to himself than to her, that he should have brought a comb. They buy a drink at the nearest kiosk and sit down on the bench again. At this moment, Wayne asks why she sold the house in the first place. After all, it was a gift from the king. Lacey takes a sip from her glass and replies that since the journey is over, it's time to get her life in order. Then she looks at the guy and adds that she wanted to try living alone. She had never been alone on her travels, so this was a new experience for her. Wayne clearly doesn't share his friend's enthusiasm about this, but he doesn't say anything. Then he thinks for a moment. He looks at the witch and offers her a place to stay. Wayne offered her his country house, where the girl would be more comfortable. There are many books, delicious food, even a dog. The manager will not interfere, and the witch will be able to do as she pleases. It's more comfortable than the inn, and it's free. The girl sees the logic in this. She thanks the guy, but refuses because such a life would not last long. Until her wedding. The young people look at each other, and Lacey speaks about it calmly, with a slight smile. Wayne looks slightly surprised by this news. Her fiancé is Lamond from the ducal family of Dejafun. The Witch of Dawn reminds Wayne that this has been discussed before. The young man says he remembers something like that. Lacey says that he recently came to the castle to greet her after her return. She then recalls the day of that meeting. The girl was asked to wait. She was left on a sofa in a luxurious hall. She thinks that every time she comes to the castle, everything shines so brightly that it's like she's stepping into a treasure chest. The girl was clearly nervous. Despite wearing her best dress, Lacey still feels like a stranger in this wealth. The opening door snaps her out her thoughts. Lamond enters the hall and greets his future bride, saying that he is glad to see her safe and sound. Lacey greets him in return with a slight bow. The guy says that everyone in the capital is talking about the team of heroes and that many of his acquaintances are fans of the Witch of Dawn. However, he doesn't know how to tell them the truth, because everyone knows the rumors about the red-haired beauty. This remark clearly upsets Lacey, but she chooses to remain silent. Lamond notices the girl's staff leaning against the sofa. The girl hastily apologizes, getting ready to put it away, but the young man says it's okay. True, despite the fact that she killed many demons and monsters. Thanks to this, she saved the world, and he is proud of her. But the smell of demon blood has no place in his home, and he asks Lacey to get rid of it. She has no choice but to agree, looking at her weapon with some sadness and clutching it tightly in her hands. Lacey knows that, in fact, the engagement of a duke and a commoner is impossible, but Lamond personally begged the king for it. After all, high magical power is an indicator of status for the nobility. And now that the demon king has been defeated, she is expected to give birth to an heir to whom she will pass on her power. This is the last role she has been assigned. Thinking about this, Reishii visibly darkens, taking another sip of her drink. Wayne looks at her. Then he calls out to her, forcing her to leave her memories behind. He reminds her of the king's offer. Any reward for defeating the enemy. The girl didn't ask for anything, and the guy asked if she had changed her mind. She smiles slightly and puts down her glass, and picks up her staff. She says she still doesn't need anything, but she has a request for Wayne himself. The young witch asks him to burn the staff with magic, because she cannot take it with her to the Duke's house. She herself has not been able to bring herself to do it. Despite her resolute tone, Reishii's hands tremble as she speaks. Her friend notices this and refuses to do it. After all, this staff is very dear to her. The girl accepts this answer with a smile, but thinks to herself that she will ask another time. After all, the staff must be destroyed. It is her last duty. She thinks again. The role for which she existed was to destroy the Demon King. Her journey with her friends, her life as a magician, had come to an end. Evening slowly descends on the city. Wayne offers to walk the girl to the tavern. The city lights are already lit, and townspeople stroll along the illuminated cobblestone streets. On the way, Lacey's companion asks what kind of person her fiancé is. After all, she only knows his name. The guy also says that she can't be completely uninterested in her chosen one. This makes her mentally compare Wayne to her mother, who is testing her future son-in-law, but at the same time, she feels slightly embarrassed. She herself knows little about Lamond, as their conversations have been very superficial. The young witch begins to describe the Lord. Dark blonde hair, brown eyes. He is slightly taller than Wayne and very thin. While his girlfriend is talking, he turns his attention elsewhere. The girl also adds that her fiancé is about 10 years older than her, which allows the swordsman to assume that he is about 25 years old. Suddenly, he points to a man in the crowd accompanied by a young lady as an example. Lacey looks in the same direction and agrees, because they even have similar hairstyles. But upon closer inspection, suddenly, she covers her face with her hood, either out of fear or shame. At first, the guy doesn't understand the reason for the girl's behavior, but she explained that this was Lord Lamond. Wayne immediately realizes that this is a secret meeting, given the closeness of the two. The girl tries to justify her future husband, saying that they may just be friends, like she and Wayne, but it doesn't sound very convincing. And after the Lord kisses the stranger, Wayne sarcastically adds that they are very close friends indeed. Candlelight is visible in 2 windows of the tavern, and one of those rooms is Lacey's. She has arranged all the paintings she bought on her desk. She placed her staff at the head of the bed, but was unable to sleep. As the girl lay in bed, she was overwhelmed by thoughts of what she had seen. She was not all surprised by this. From the very beginning, she knew that Lamond would never love her, and that sooner or later he would find someone he could truly love. The girl looked at the magical seal on the back of her hand, realizing that she didn't care about it. She just had to fulfill her role, no matter what happened, so that she would not lose anything. Memories of her former team flash before the witch's eyes, and before finally falling asleep, the witch acknowledges the learned fact that she has no other choice. At that moment, Wayne was also awake in his mansion, worrying about Lacey and her stubbornness. The guy stood on the wide balcony, leaning on the railing, while the starry sky stretched out above his head. He already understood that the girl did not know how to be angry, think about her own interests and desires, and even seemed not to understand that it was normal to have feelings. He concludes that it was the contract that taught her this, recalling the mark on the Witch of Dawn's hand. The young man knows that this is cruel, but at the same time, having personally witnessed the power of this mage, he cannot help but agree that leaving such great power unsupervised would be dangerous for the country. The boy grips the railing with his hand and presses his lips together, remembering the image of his girlfriend, and wondering if she is happy with this life. Despite this, he mentally addresses Lacey, saying that he is not going to tell her how to live her life, because he has no right to do so. But if she ever truly wants something with all her heart, he doesn't finish his thought, and once again we see the tavern room, where the lights have been turned off, and the young witch sleeps, half covered by a blanket, while the end of the ribbon from her weapon lies in her hand. The next day, Lacey is again thinking about her engagement. She remembers how, when she was 10 years old, she first met and was betrothed to the Duke. There was a big difference in their ages and social status. His gaze was cold and distant, which she barely remembered. Now, 5 years later, after defeating the Demon King, she saw him cheating on her when she met her squad mate. The girl sits on a stone fence in an empty park near a fountain. Again, nothing is happening. The girl realizes that she is wasting the remaining days before her wedding, having done nothing even today. She also wonders what her other friends are doing now. But Lacey is torn from her aimless musings by the voice of a child calling out to his mother. He says he wants to be a hatter, to which his mother asks if he would rather be a knight. The boy, with a joyful gleam in his eyes, replies that since the hero has defeated the Demon King, there is no need for knights, and that he wants to become a hatter so he can repair his mother's hat. His mother says she will look forward to it. Hearing this makes the girl smile. She remembers that when the threat of demons loomed over them, everyone thought only of survival, but now they can dream of the future again. But this thought makes her wonder what her own future holds. The girl remembers their trip again. Specifically, one of their stops in the forest, where Wayne distracts her from her thoughts by asking about her seal. Such attention frightened the girl. She pulls her hood tighter over her head while Wayne stands opposite her with 2 bowls of soup. He handed one of them to Lacey, inviting her to breakfast the next day, since she had skipped a meal that day. The girl thanks her companion and takes the bowl. The guy assumes that the witch's contract with the king is very powerful and asks what would happen if it were broken. She looks at him in such a way that the swordsman immediately realizes that she herself does not know, and this clearly upsets him. This reaction makes the girl even more nervous, apologize, and question her competence as a magician. Wayne says that's not the point. He asks what Lacey would do if disobeying him meant instant death. She looks at Wayne with sincere incomprehension, because she wouldn't do anything, as she wouldn't be able to disobey. This logic confuses her companion a little. After all, he had something completely different in mind. Lacey never thought about her future, because it would be decided for her. Therefore, returning to the present, she does not even know what to do with herself, and just watches her mother and son walk away. Only in the evening, in her room at the inn, planning to go to bed, does the girl remember that she hasn't eaten anything all day. She thinks about Wayne, who told her to watch what she eats, and wonders if she eats for 2 days tomorrow. Will it count as eating today? Suddenly, she hears a quiet knock on the window and wonders who could be knocking at this hour. Opening the window, the girl is ready to attack the uninvited guest if it is an enemy. But it turns out to be magic, and it's Wayne's magic that envelopes the paper bird. It lands on Lacey's palm, and she guesses that it is most likely a variation of wind magic, and that the spell was invented by the sender himself. Wayne always came up with something interesting. The witch knew this, and his spell that imitated birdsong was a good example. Looking at the night visitor, the girl notices a piece of paper on the inside of its tail. She unfolded the bird, which turned out to be a letter. In it, Wayne asked Lacey to reconsider the king's reward. He also asked her to eat better, drink more water, and take care of herself. At the end, he added that the young witch could always rely on him. This short message made the girl smile, and sharpening her pen, she began to write a reply. She decided to write about the staff again, but she didn't mention anything about food, deciding to eat the next day after all. Folding the letter into the same bird shape that the young man had sent her, Lacey sent it to the mansion. It reached its destination, but the witch miscalculated the force, and the piece of paper stuck into one of the columns. It went in quite deep. This frightened the 2 maids and slightly embarrassed the owner of the estate. He pulled the letter out of the resulting crack and began to read it. In the morning, he sent Lacey a reply in the same way. The girl had just woken up from the sound of a bird tapping on her window. Wayne asked her to come to the castle. He also said that he would talk to her personally about the staff. When they met, the swordsman praised his friend for being a quick learner, but he asked her to take into account the difference in strength, because even a simple piece of paper flying at such a speed could kill. The girl was concerned, asking if he had been hurt. The young man replied that he had not, because he would not be a hero if he had not dodged it. Lacey was happy with this outcome, and the young man asked her not to throw anything like that at anyone else, so as not to cause harm. Then he started talking about the staff, looking at his companion. He asked if the witch was sure she wanted to burn her weapon. She involuntarily grips her staff a little tighter. She lowers her head, and stammering, she replies that she is sure. At that moment, Wayne shouts at another girl, assuming that he is from the ceremony. This lady turns out to be Princess Alicia. Wayne turns to the representative of the crown and greets her politely, to which she replies that he should attend tea parties more often, as many people want to see him. Lacey, watching their conversation, feels out of place in the company of the nobility, even though at that moment Wayne is thinking how much he doesn't want to go to all these social events. Lacey tries to slip away quietly before her friend notices, but the princess suddenly asks Wayne, Who is next to him? Who is next to him? She asked if she was lost. The guy explained that she was one of those who fought with him against the Demon King, the Witch of Dawn. Alicia sighed and apologized for not recognizing her. After all, she looked completely different from her portraits, although the 2 of them had already met. This made Lacey nervous again, but Alicia was completely innocent. After that, the princess said she had things to do and, smiling sweetly, left. When the girl left, Wayne said that this small talk was a waste of time, looking after Alicia as she walked away. Lacey asked him if he would let the princess go alone, but he replied that he was not paid to accompany royalty. Then he turned his attention to Lacey's staff, asking what she had decided about her weapon. The girl gathered her thoughts, preparing to say exactly what she wanted. Then she handed the staff to the swordsman, asking him to destroy it. But she hesitated on one of the words. This completely threw the girl off balance, causing her to lower her head in shame and wish she could sink through the ground. For a moment, silence reigns in the castle courtyard. Then Wayne strokes the girl's head. This slightly confuses the girl. The young man asks if she knows where the training hall is. She answers in the affirmative. The guy says that this staff can only be burned with magic and that he called her to the castle to do it there, but someone might be in the hall right now. Lacey is already tense from these words. But Wayne just smiles and suggests they take a walk to the West Garden, where hardly anyone ever goes, because it is poorly maintained. The girl is a little surprised, but agrees. This part of the garden does indeed look unkempt, although the castle and nearby buildings are visible behind the tall trees. Birds sit in the branches, and ivy has already begun to entwine the statue that stands there. The witch walked a little behind her companion, looking at the garden overgrown with wild plants. After a while, she stops, pursing her lips, and Wayne stops with her. She thanks him and says she is ready. The young man turns around, looks at the girl, and asks if she is sure. She answers affirmatively. But suddenly the guy hears something, and when Lacey asks him again, he covers her mouth with his hand so she won't make a sound. Then he nods toward the bushes where the sounds are coming from. Only then did he let go of the girl. He allowed her to peek behind the branches to see those whose conversation they were hearing. On the other side was Princess Alicia in the arms of Duke Lamont. The witch is confused, and Wayne is indignant, perceiving this as some kind of mockery. At that moment, Lacey realizes that last time it was just a girl from the city. Then now it was much more serious. And all because if someone saw and talked about such a secret meeting, it would damage the reputation of the crown. And she couldn't ignore that. So Lacey stood up, and despite her friend's attempt to stop her, told him to stay in the bushes and stepped forward herself. The girl gripped her staff tighter and took a deep breath. She called out to the couple. They turned around, looking clearly frightened, to see who had found them. But Lamont did not expect to see his fiancée, but he quickly pulled himself together. He forced a smile. As if nothing had happened, he said how unexpected this meeting was for him, asking if the girl had business at the castle. The lord also began to justify himself, saying that he had just met the princess and was only expressing his respect. But Lacey stopped him, saying, albeit a little hesitantly, that she had seen everything. And since she is his fiancée, such behavior is treason and is not acceptable. These words anger Lamont, and he interrupts her, making her shrink back. He clenches his fists and replies that he and the princess love each other, and Lacey has called it such a vile word. Lamont begins to yell at the frightened girl, saying how she, a low-born, insignificant orphan, dares to call herself his fiancée. He continues to insult her. In addition, Lamont admits that he was in despair when the king ordered him to marry her. Then he turns to the royal personage. He kneels before her and kisses the back of her hand. He tells her how much he loves her and that a marriage without love is meaningless. Alicia covers her mouth with her hand. She is amazed and tears of happiness well up in her eyes. Then the man stands up and embraces the princess. And pointing at Lacey with his finger, he insults her again, adding that the thought of touching someone like her makes him sick. He also says he will annul the marriage imposed by the king, calling him brainless. The princess tries to pull him away from insulting her father, but her efforts are very weak. Wayne, still sitting in the bushes, sighs, and yet he peeks out from his hiding place. He addresses the representative of the crown, asking if she has finished her business. Then he turns his attention to the lord, but does not have time to finish his sentence. Like caught lovers, they hide from view. Lacey watches the princess and her fiancé leave, comparing the speed of their disappearance to that of hares. Wayne replies that such a comparison is humiliating for hares. He says that they have hurt the girl much more, and when Lacey tries to say that Lamont is right about something, Wayne raises his voice, insisting that he is wrong and has sawdust in his head. Calm down, the guy looks at his girlfriend. He asks what she's going to do now. Lacey replies that the king makes the decision, and that her chosen one cannot break off the engagement himself. Wayne asks another question. Does she want this herself? She stammers. She looks at the contract seal. The girl realizes that it doesn't matter what she wants. She has to get married, but remembering what the Lord said to her, how he looked at her, they definitely won't have children, and that's a problem. Lacey's mind flashes back to the day she met her fiancé, when he held out his hand to her, and she trustingly accepted it. At the time, she was even happy that she would have a family, although she couldn't even dream that Lamont would love her. But she never thought he despised her so much. And yet, she couldn't leave it at that. Wayne's call snaps her out of her thoughts. She covers her eyes. She sighed and finally said that she would settle everything with the king. Wayne replied that in that case, they would postpone the matter of the staff, and he would take care of more important business. That is, he will request an audience with the king. With these words, the young man leans slightly toward the girl. After a moment's thought, Lacey agrees, which brings a broad smile to the young man's face. However, this reaction surprises the girl. She tells herself that it's all right, since the matter concerns the aristocracy, and Wayne understands it better than she does, and he'll be able to sort everything out. The time comes to meet the king. The heroes stand kneeling before the monarch's throne in a majestic hall lit by a large chandelier with candles, with tall windows and tapestries on the walls. Next to them, Lamond is also kneeling, and next to the king himself is his daughter, Alicia. The head of state addresses Wayne, saying that since he requested an important meeting, he has gathered everyone and asks what the matter is. And why does his daughter have to be present? The man looks at his daughter, who tries to keep a straight face despite her emotions. He also sees the Witch of Dawn and the heir to the Dejafun family. Lacey looks at her fiancé, seeing how nervous he is and how he is behaving slightly worse than his lover. The king gives Wayne his word. He thanks him, and looking up, he says that the matter at hand also concerns the princess. Silence falls over the castle, and only Wayne's voice can be heard. As he speaks, he mentions something very important. Lacey looks at her companion and sees his confidence. She realizes that the matter has taken a serious turn and tries to figure out what to do. The hall falls silent again. Lacey looks at the swordsman. The lord diligently hides his eyes, and the speaker, as if nothing had happened, suggests to begin. He points to the heir to the Duke of Dejafun and the Witch of Dawn behind him, who are trying to look anywhere but at each other, saying that the two are betrothed by the king himself. But Lamond has another woman. The monarch is outraged by what he hears and turns to the groom to find out if it is true. The man is frightened. With a trembling voice, he tries to deny everything. Wayne looks at him over his shoulder. Then he asks His Majesty not to rush to conclusions. He does not want to accuse the Lord. He understands that this engagement is for the future of the country. But if it does not bring happiness and destroys true love, it is a tragedy. And so he wanted to give Lamond a chance to explain himself. Lamond is surprised by these words, although he almost immediately picks up on this, asking the king for permission to speak. He says he knows about the service of marriage between nobles to the state, but he admits that he has met his destiny, and that is Princess Alicia. The girl is stunned by such a public statement, and her cheeks flush. Wayne continues to glance at him over his shoulder. Lamond adds that he is guilty before both the king and Lady Lacey. Hiding his feelings and entering into this marriage would be a true betrayal. The young man says all this very pompously, theatrically, pressing his hand to his chest. Lacey listens to him. She concludes that Wayne's goal is to convince the king to recognize the union of the lord and the princess by officially betrothing them. That way, there will be no scandal. They are well matched in status, and no one will have to be forced into anything. And considering the fact that His Majesty dotes on his daughter, he will agree. Alicia takes her father's hand, convincing him that she also loves the future duke. Wayne confirms this. He mentions that Lamond had said the same thing to them recently. Using his magic, he reproduces the Lord's declaration of love for the entire hall to hear. Everyone looks up at the spell curling toward the ceiling, and they listen as the young man talks about the meaninglessness of a loveless marriage. Alicia turns to her father and begins to cry. The king concludes that this makes sense. He asks his daughter not to cry. Lamond is inspired, stands up, and begins to ask the head of state for permission to marry the princess. But then, with the movement of Wayne's fingers, the groom's voice is heard again, saying that the mere thought of touching Lacey makes him sick. A dead silence hangs in the hall. The king asks the young man if it is his voice, and without giving him a chance to answer, he asks what he said about the greatest magician in the kingdom. What was heard greatly angered His Majesty. Seeing this, the future duke tried to justify himself, saying that it was a misunderstanding, that the girl was so beautiful that he considered himself unworthy. But then the spell reproduced the young man's last words about the king's stupidity and the annulment of the engagement. This finally enraged the head of state, and he ordered the lord to be arrested. The guards immediately rushed up to him and twisted his arms behind his back. This greatly upset the princess. Together with her beloved, she tried to convince her father to at least talk to him. Lacey was very surprised by this turn of events, not expecting anything like this. Then she looked at Wayne, who was very proud of himself. He addressed His Majesty again, but he interrupted him, saying that he had more important things to do. Wayne simply asked him to make a balanced decision. He mentioned that the Lord had connections with other women. Nevertheless, before deciding the fate of the adulterer, this issue must be investigated. This circumstance further enraged the monarch, and it frightened the princess even more. After that, the king investigated Lamond's relationships with other women. There were quite a few of them, so many that the head of state was very surprised when he saw the list. It is unknown whether his daughter found out about this, but the girl was very upset and did not want to leave her chambers. It must have been very painful to learn that the man whose words had touched her so deeply had deceived her. Duke Dejafun himself came to see Reishii. He apologized profusely to the young witch for his son's behavior, literally falling at her feet. As a result, Lamond was stripped of his inheritance, and his engagement to the Witch of Dawn was broken off. After all these turbulent days, she could finally breathe easy, and now the girl is sitting in a field not far from the castle. The sky above her is clear, without a single cloud, and Wayne is next to her, also admiring the view. The girl admits that she feels more tired than she did even after the battle with the Demon King. The guy smiles, looking at his girlfriend, and says how stupid the former lord was to even try to attack the princess. With these words, he caught Reishii's attention. Wayne then adds that the lord has no taste, no brains, no manners, and is so frivolous that the duke should be glad to be rid of such an heir. In addition, Wayne imagined that if Reishii married the lord, she would take the name Dejafun. I'm sure it sounds awful, and it's good that the engagement has been broken off. Nearby, tied to a tree, the young man's horse grazes. The girl is confused by her friend's words, but suddenly tears begin to roll down her cheeks. She herself does not understand the reason for this, and Wayne certainly doesn't. That's why he's worried. At first, he thinks that Reishii really wanted to get married. Then he dismisses the thought, deciding that it was because of the hurt caused by her ex-fiancé's words, and tries to calm her down. The girl wipes away her tears, wants to say that everything is fine, but her throat feels tight. Then she touches her cane with the toe of her boot. She looks at it, remembering that she hasn't burned it yet. Reishii was about to ask Wayne about it, but suddenly she wonders why she needs it. After all, if she's not getting married, she doesn't need to do it. The girl picks up her weapon. Then she presses it to her chest and starts crying again. She realizes that she doesn't really want to part with this staff. She remembers her childhood in the orphanage. All the children are playing outside, while Reishii sits alone with her dolls in one of the rooms. She was afraid to approach the other children, so she preferred to watch them from the window. And one day, the girl discovered that her hands glowed slightly, and when she touched her cheeks, they were pleasantly warm. At that moment, an elderly female caregiver entered the room. She saw that the orphan was literally glowing because of the mana seeping out. After being examined, she was placed under the care of the state. That's how she ended up in the castle for the first time, where the king ordered her to hone her magic, calling it her destiny. Since then, she immersed herself in her studies, forgetting about food and sleep, so much so that by the time her needs for these things had dulled, the witch had come to be known as the greatest sorceress in the kingdom. As a result, she found a fiancé, and the Witch of Dawn was included in the squad to battle the Demon King. The day they set out on their journey is also etched in her memory. After receiving the king's blessing, the iron gates rose, releasing the 4 companions. It was Reishii's first time leaving the capital, and she felt a slight fear. She stopped and looked down at her feet. Suddenly, Wayne called out to her, urging her on, and gripping her walking stick tighter in her hands. The girl stepped after them, until the wind pulled the hood of her cloak off. Then, for the first time, she realized that anxiety and anticipation are similar. She had experienced many pleasant moments with her squad. Together, they searched for the right paths, treated wounds after battles, and rested in taverns. The dome of the sky above their heads, the changing winds, the seemingly endless road, and the warmth of a friendly shoulder. All these memories were in the staff. Reishii admits to herself that she bought those portraits from the artist because of her loneliness. She wonders what future the eyes of that Witch of Dawn reflect, and then what awaits her. The first answer is already very familiar, as if imposed by the contract itself in the form of a seal on her hand, saying that everything will be decided for her. She is required to marry and bear children, and even if her engagement to the Lord is broken, they will find her another. And this is inevitable. But another thought breaks through these thoughts. Tears are still streaming from the girl's eyes. Reishii looks up at the sky, spread out over the field. A sudden gust of wind ruffles her hair. The girl thinks that she could go around everything she sees if she were free, unbound by anything. If, of course, she is even allowed to desire such a future. Reishii grips her staff tighter again, tears dripping onto her clenched palms. She continues to sob quietly while Wayne is still confused, not knowing how to comfort her. He reaches out to her, but stops. After thinking for a moment, he moves his fingers and magic catches the tears from his friend's cheeks, making them hang in the air. Reishii looks at them, and the guy smiles at her. The girl smiles back at him and agrees. She adds that his magic is very interesting. Wayne looks down, smiling too, and he began to talk about his childhood. As a child, he was not strong in magic and had little mana. And because he was also the second son in the family, no one had high hopes for him. So he often played pranks using spells, for example, scaring his sister and brother with his cat, which, thanks to his camouflage magic, looked like a lion and a dragon to them. Of course, he was scolded for this, but it did not particularly affect the youngster. Lacey, rather jokingly, wonders if her friend had a childhood, to which the swordsman reacts indignantly, asking who she thinks he is. Then he raises his head and says that he never thought he could become a hero. The girl looks at him with a smile, then, closing her eyes, says that she has a wish after all. She no longer wants to burn the staff. This is her new wish. Lacey raises her head, looking at a bird flying overhead. The girl admits that she wants to live alone, like Lacey, to walk her own path freely. The guy watches her through her black hair. He squeezes his fingers slightly. Then he raises his hand, calling the girl. She looks at the young man as he reaches out to her. Wayne said that if she wanted to, he would help her in any way he could. And he cheered the girl up. The Dawn which looks at her companion with flushed cheeks. And then she took the outstretched hand, getting up from the grass. And with a smile, she agreed. A week later, a horse-drawn carriage was traveling through the forest. Several people were riding in the covered wagon, including Lacey. She notices that they have already traveled quite far from the city and wonders how much further they have to go. And yet she still couldn't believe that she was going somewhere alone. The girl looked outside, watching as they drove through the forest. Lacey had originally planned to walk, but Wayne strictly forbade her do so, because doing so just because you don't know how to ride in a wagon is foolish and dangerous. She also shortened her walking stick so that it wouldn't get in the way and hit it. Now she definitely admits that her friend was right, as it is faster and safer, so Lacey was glad she agreed. Afterwards, she wonders, is this a journey or a move? After all, the place she is going to now will be her new home. The girl clutches her pointed hat to her chest. She remembers how she came to the king a week ago, to ask again for the reward she had previously refused. She is still kneeling in the familiar hall, and she is still nervous. The monarch gives her his word. The girl gathers her courage, while behind her, Wayne kneels in support. Lacey reveals that she wants to live alone, not relying on anyone, not bound by obligations, living on her own. And she asks to have the seal of the contract removed. The king tries to object, but Wayne calls out to him and looks at him. The man hesitates. He sighs deeply but agrees. The girl looks at him with wide eyes, and His Majesty stretches out his hand. And Lacey is surrounded by magic, symbols. The seal on her hand begins to glow. The king says that the Witch of Dawn has served the kingdom for many years, and, in gratitude for her victory over the Demon King, he releases her from the seal of the contract. He also gives her a new name, Lacey Estelle. The magic of the contract shatters like glass. She is even given new clothes and now looks better. The sorceress is sure that in her new place, she will finally be free. And then she wonders, what does it mean to be free? This is followed by the question of what she can actually do. After all, nothing was ever required of her except to defeat the enemy and get married, which is essentially nothing. The girl lowers her eyes, her thoughts now turning to her new surname. In ancient times, people connected the stars and drew stories in the sky. And without the stars as a guide, sailors could not find their way. And Lacey wonders if she is worthy of such a surname. At that moment, the carriage stops. The driver calls out to her, saying they have arrived. She gets out, holding her hat, and sees a small village among the hills, the village of Plume. The girl notices that it is a very quiet place. The king gave her 2 farewell gifts. These were a name and a house far from the capital. She walks to the village, looking at the address written on a piece of paper. She donated most of the reward for defeating the Demon King, so the house was a great help to her. On the way, she meets a little squirrel in a tree. She takes a beetle off her cloak and puts it on the grass. And she thinks. She still doesn't know what to do and decides to go see the house. On the way, she sees a boy digging in the ground. Lacey decides it's a field, but then notices that it's too overgrown. But more importantly, she thinks that this child, although younger than her, is working very hard. And then the thought occurs to her that she also needs to try hard, for example, to improve her living conditions. It is essential to eat. Only the girl doesn't like shopping. It occurs to her that she could gather edible herbs. It's mushroom and acorn season right now. But she dismisses this idea because of the rumbling in her stomach, as she needs something substantial. Throughout her deliberations, a boy who had noticed her tried to call out to Lacey. Only on the third try did the girl finally hear him and get scared. She asked if he was calling her. The young man replied that there was no one else around, so he was talking to her. The girl came closer. It turned out that the boy needed to remove a tree. He wanted to make a field, but this obstacle was delaying his work. He looked away, saying that it would take him another year to get it done. So he thought the girl could use magic to remove the tree. The young man was enthusiastic about this, But Lacey was hesitant. The sorceress knows that magic is convenient, but it is not omnipotent, and she doesn't know any spells for moving trees. She considers simply blowing up the necessary area, but quickly dismisses the idea, because even with protection, it would be dangerous and fraught with consequences even for the youngest farmer. It could also ruin the land. Lacey is already thinking of giving up, but only after starting to say something. She notices the birds chirping on the branches. Lane remembers the spells Wayne used to send her notes in the form of birds and to wipe away her tears. She asks the boy to step aside. She enlarges her hidden staff. She closes her eyes. A symbol appears in a circle under her feet, and magic begins to swirl around her, billowing her clothes and hair. The mage connects the sensation of space, the earth, the force of gravity, and the wind, realizing that she can do it. She opens her eyes, and the young man sees the tree that was blocking his way take flight with its roots into the air. He is amazed by what he sees, and Lacey asks him where to move the former obstacle. The magic moves the tree aside, and the girl also removes the stones that are in the way and a mole that has been accidentally disturbed. When the girl decides that this is enough, the boy has bare ground in the right place, ready to be broken up on this field. He is delighted with what he sees and with the result. The girl is already starting to leave, quietly saying so, but the boy grabs her by the elbow. He forces her to stop and turn around. Stumbling, he thanks the witch, and holding her hand, he adds that she is amazing. Then he blushes slightly and apologizes, which surprises Lacey a little. The boy explained that he had given up hope because the clearing wasn't progressing, so he said something without thinking. They both looked at the cleared ground. The boy lowers his head slightly and says that Lacey did it after all. It was incredible. She really helped him out, and he thanks her. The girl blushes at such words, and tears well up in her eyes. Ashamed, she covers her face with the brim of her hat and turns away. She mumbles that there is nothing to thank him for. The young farmer asks her to repeat what she said. He is a little taken aback by her reaction. Lacey wipes away her tears, thinking that she hasn't cried in a long time, but lately tears come to her eyes on their own, which confuses her. But she also wonders why her tears are so warm. The boy waves goodbye to her, and the girl leaves. She lowers her eyes, clutching her staff. She thought she was useless and began to believe that freedom was meaningless for someone like her. Lacey looks up at the sky. The first stars were already appearing, one of which shone particularly brightly. A question arose in the girl's mind. What if that wasn't true, and she could be useful? At this time, at the Wayne estate, a servant holds a list in his hands and asks the young swordsman if he wants everything on it to be prepared. The young man nods, and the servant bows and says that everything will be done. Wayne also specifies that everything must be ready for his next vacation. The servant asks him again, surprised, looking up at him. He thought these things were for the expedition. The young man looks down at the map, showing the village of Plume. He mentions a housewarming gift for a friend. At that moment, Lacey arrives at her new home and goes inside. A week after Lacey moved to the village, Wayne visited her with gifts. At the same time, he suggested opening a store. This confused the girl, and she began to ask, for whom? During this conversation, the guy braided the girl's pigtails, replying that of course it was for her. Lacey objected, saying she couldn't do it. At that moment, Wayne finished braiding her last pigtail. He reasoned aloud that he should have taken a ribbon, so he could have done a different hairstyle. The girl was still confused by the proposal, asking why he thought she needed it. The guy replied that there are different kinds of shops, and he wasn't suggesting she open a popular bakery with huge queues. She imagined all the baked goods in vivid detail. After admitting that she didn't know how to bake, Wayne had to distract her from this thought, saying that she didn't have to bake bread. He said that maybe it all happened by accident, but she helped that boy clear the field. She enjoyed helping someone, she wanted help again, and that was very good. But you can't stop there. Wayne turns his back to her, and Lacey raises her eyebrows slightly. The guy adds that you need money to live. The girl repeats the last word, looking at her friend with wide eyes. He explains that she has been living under the care of the state all this time, which is why she never thought about it. But her previous life also required money. Rent, servants' wages, food, household items, clothing, magical materials. All of these were expenses. Now Lacey doesn't have to pay for a house, and she doesn't need much on her own. But even so, she won't get anything for free. He even suggested that the money she had received earlier was already running out. All this made the girl even more nervous because she didn't even know how to earn money. For Wayne, this was confirmation that the store was really needed. That way, the sorceress would help people and earn an income. Finally, the girl understood, though she blushed slightly. However, Wayne adds that if she was going to live as a hermit and eat grass, that would be a different matter, asking if that was what she wanted. Lacey denies this, although the guy's words hit the nail on the head, as she had indeed considered such a lifestyle. The witch exhales, looking at Wayne, lost in thought about him. She considered her companion remarkable because he was a nobleman and probably never needed money, but he understood the lives of ordinary people better than she did. The guy even took care of everyone on the trip. Although, in reality, Wayne was sure that there was not a single normal person in their group, and if he didn't take everything upon himself, everything would go wrong. That's why he did the cooking while the other three waited for him. But Lacey still admired his many skills, believing that it was not for nothing that the Holy Sword had chosen him, even if the artifact had no idea about it. Then she catches herself. She shook her head, dismissing unnecessary thoughts, while her guest silently watched her friend's inner turmoil. She realized that she too now had to learn to be independent, and all these thoughts weighed heavily on her mind. Wayne looked at the girl for a moment, folding his arms. Then he smiled. He walked over to the table. He encouraged the girl with words, telling her to start with what she could and not to rush. Lacey wanted to object, moving her chair closer to the table where the guy had already sat down. But he looked out the window. The wind was tearing the leaves off one of the trees, carrying them away. Wayne says that there was a cold wind in the morning. Winter is coming soon. Then he looked at Lacey, propping his head up with his hand, and added that she needed to get used to her new life first and also gather her strength so she wouldn't catch a cold. The girl tried to say something to him, but the guy lowered his head. Then he looked at her from under his eyebrows, asking if she was eating properly. This made Lacey feel anxious, as usual. But then she smiled, saying that of course she was eating well. Then the swordsman asked her when she last ate. Lacey got up from her chair and said that she had eaten in the morning, and the morning before that, and the evening before that, and the day before that. Wayne was confused for a second, but then he showed his admiration. He couldn't believe that this was coming from someone who had pushed herself to exhaustion and then eaten medicinal herbs to recover. He also decided to ask what exactly she ate at each meal, and the answer to everything was carrots. The guy was ready to accept this fact, if she prepared it in different ways, but then he saw that Lacey was eating the vegetable raw, so he fell silent. In the end, he cooked carrots with herbs for her, which the girl really liked, since it was both tasty and now soft. Wayne admitted that the root vegetable could be eaten raw, but boiled carrots were easier to chew. And in response to the praise, he said that he felt strange when he was praised for simply boiling carrots. Then he decided to ask, where did the girl get so many carrots? Looking at one of the boxes, she said they had been given to her, and when asked by whom, she told him about the boy she had helped. Although the sorceress refused, he still brought her a whole bunch. Wayne praised her for accepting the gift, and when Lacey objected, still convinced that her actions were insignificant, he replied that it might be so for her. But for the young farmer, it was enough to express his gratitude, and she needed to learn to accept that. In addition, looking at the spider that had come down from the ceiling, Wayne reminded her that during their journey, the villagers had also treated them to food. Lacey remembers that this was true. Ordinary people often held feasts in honor of their saviors. It was gratitude, but because she disliked large crowds, the girl preferred to refuse and train somewhere off to the side. And looking at Wayne, who was thinking about cleaning the kitchen at that moment, she realized how much she was missing. Not only other people's feelings. She didn't even understand her own. The girl ate another spoonful of carrots, and she exhaled with the understanding that she had a lot to do. She got up from the table, admitting to herself that her friend was right and that she would start with what she could. And she would start by helping Wayne clean up, who had already set to work with the help of magic. And so night fell. And then, the next morning, at breakfast, Lacey learned that the guy was already getting ready to leave. She said he could stay longer. Sipping tea from his cup, Wayne replied that he would like that too. But he was about to leave for a mission. The sorceress asked him again, and he put his cup on the saucer. The young man explained that a dangerous monster had appeared in the north, and there was a possibility that it could be a servant of demons. The girl was a little confused because they had destroyed all the demons, to which Wayne replied that it was only demons, but not all of their minions. Now that the demons are gone, their servants will weaken, but they will still have to deal with them as they appear, so the expeditions will continue. Lacey listens to her companion in silence. Then she asks him to take care of himself. Outside, a cool wind is still blowing, tearing leaves from the trees, and the sorceress came out to see her guest off, as it was already time for him to leave. He advised her not to eat only carrots, as he had left many other things in the pantry, and the girl replied that she would try. Meanwhile, the boy's horse was chewing on one of the root vegetables. Wayne turned around to look at the girl's house. He noticed that such a large house was difficult to clean. He tidied up the kitchen, but everything else remained untouched. The young man also pointed out that the air in the house was very stuffy and asked if she aired out the room she didn't use. Lacey said that wasn't what they were talking about right now. She handed the young man a jar of medicinal herbs she had found in the pantry and offered it to him. Wayne smiled and declined, asking her to keep it, as he had his own medicine in the expedition wagon. He also warned her to be careful, because when you live alone, you never know what might happen. The witch smiled at this, agreeing, mentally comparing him to her mother again. Finally, Wayne compliments her new hat and clothes, looking gently at his friend. She touched the brim of her hat, smiled, and blushed slightly, and thanked him. Wayne left, waving to the girl, and she waved back, clutching the jar of herbs to her chest. Afterwards, she looked at her hand, thinking that even after fulfilling his role as a hero, the guy continued to fight. So she couldn't run away and say she couldn't do it. Lacey thought for a moment. Then she turned around and went into her house. At first she thought about the store, then switched to cleaning. She assesses the state of the house. The sorceress concludes that she could have been given a more modest house. But now she has to decide where to start cleaning. A moment from Lacey's squad's journey. A pillar of magic rises above the treetops, scaring away the birds in the area. Saint Dana looks toward the source of the noise, noticing that the witch is still busy, while Brooks asks Wayne if the magic needs a rest. He sighs. He gets up, saying he will call the sorceress. Dana smiles, saying how caring the guy is and that she will save a portion for the girl. Wayne finds Lacey in the forest, standing with her back to him. The young man thinks that training is good, of course. But getting so carried away that you forget to eat is not normal. And he also calls his companion a real magic fanatic. He calls out to her. But when Lacey turns around, she looks tired and exhausted. This confuses Wayne. The girl asks what happened. She receives the answer that nothing happened and that she just forgot about food. As they return to Dana and Brooks, Wayne wonders if Lacey really loves magic. She clearly didn't look happy or enthusiastic. He also wonders if the Witch of Dawn is considered the best magician in the kingdom, but talent alone is clearly not enough to achieve that. All that reckless training at such a young age leaves one guessing. How much has she been through? And what for, anyway? Wayne hears a cough behind him, which makes him worry about his companion. Lacey is currently sitting at the table, thinking. She is experiencing a strange feeling. In theory, she should already be married and living in the duchy of Deja Fun. The girl lowers her eyes. Just a few weeks ago, her life did not belong to her because of the seal. But now, thanks to Wayne's help, the engagement was broken off, and he also helped her decide to terminate her contract with the king. The witch gained her freedom. She moved and began to vaguely understand what she wanted. She also remembered helping the village boy with his field and his gratitude for it. But now she understood that freedom was not easy, mostly from Wayne's stories. She could not even imagine that her life could change so much. Lacey closed her eyes. After all the recent commotion, the silence brought a new wave of realization. She really was going to live here alone, in this very house, even if it was dirty at the moment. There was dust, cobwebs, and mice everywhere. A spider running across the table finally snaps her out of her thoughts, causing her to move her hand slightly. At the moment, the only clean place in the house is the kitchen, which Wayne has cleaned up, so the sorceress tells herself that there is still a lot to do and no time to daydream. And to start with, cleaning. Lacey ties her hair back, takes off her cape and hat, leaving herself in her dress, and picks up a broom. But then she looks around. She catches herself thinking that, even though she understands the necessity of it, there are so many places to clean that she doesn't know where to start. Then she looks at the broom she found in the utility room, and she comes to the conclusion that using magic for cleaning is not forbidden. Is it? Standing on a ladder, she takes out her miniaturized staff and casts a spell that causes a magic circle to appear at the end of the staff, and magic spreads throughout the house. With this, Lacey airs out the room, sweeps away the dust, beats the rugs in the yard, slightly scaring the birds, and collects the dust in one place with a broom. In the same way, she prepares water in a bucket. After all this, she thinks about magic. All other possessors of this use it as a weapon, studying a limited number of formulas in order to apply it as quickly, powerfully, and accurately as possible against their enemies. Perfecting it is considered the pride and purpose of a mage's existence. She used to think that way too. But after helping the farm boy, her opinion changed. As Lacey continued cleaning, magic swirled around her in a powerful stream. She washed the floor and walls, creating many soap bubbles. She washed the dishes, wrapping them in an air cushion. While doing all this, the witch realized something. Depending on the strength and combination, magic could do anything. It was even fun for the girl as she imagined the broom, carpet, and bucket dancing with the help of spells. After finishing the first floor, the sorceress decided to check the second floor. There she found one door that would not open. But Lacey didn't pay any attention to it, simply gathering dust at the entrance. She decided to blow it out onto the street through the main doors. A powerful gust of air burst through the open doors and knocked the approaching guest off his feet. The scream frightened the witch herself. causing her to run out onto the porch. There, sitting on the ground, was her old acquaintance, the farmer's boy, surrounded by scattered potatoes. At first, the young man did not understand what had knocked him down, assuming it was the wind. Lacey led him into the house, sat him down at the table, gave him a handkerchief to wipe off the dirt, and began to apologize. The boy just waved her off. He just asked if it was magic too. The sorceress said yes. Then she pointed to the potatoes the boy had brought, which had already been put back in a basket. He turned around and said that this was the second part of his gratitude for the field. The girl stammered her thanks, thinking to herself that this was now a new ingredient and asking Wayne if it could be cooked. She herself gave a positive answer. She took one root vegetable in her hands, noticing the pleasant smell of earth, and remembering that when her new acquaintance brought carrots last time, she didn't even have time to thank him. But she tried to remember his name, Alan. Lacey offered him tea, which he accepted, and now the girl looks at the tea set, holding a jar of tea and a spoon in her hands. She can't decide how many leaves to put in, what temperature the water should be. At that moment, the boy looks around, and when Lacey finishes brewing the tea, she notices that the house feels fresher. The girl assumes that this is most likely because she has just cleaned up. Alan says that this is also true, but he meant that the atmosphere had changed. Before, the house had felt oppressive, and she didn't want to be there. Lacey is waiting for the tea to brew. She remembers that she hasn't introduced herself to her new acquaintance. When she tells him her name, the boy is surprised and says that he is also called the Witch of Dawn from the hero squad and asks if she is the one. The girl begins to get nervous, try to understand how he figured it out so easily. Is it because of her magic or her name? Seeing no point in hiding, the sorceress gathers her courage. But as soon as she starts to speak, Alan says he was joking. After all, the Witch of Dawn is an adult with red hair. The boy even suggests that Lacey is her fan. He admits that if he has a little sister, he would like to name her after this great magician. And while he talks about the beauty and power of the hero's squad member, Lacey becomes even more convinced that she must not be revealed, becoming very frightened. The tea is brewed, and the witch pours it into cups, placing one in front of her guest. He looks inside, sees his reflection in the drink, and thanks the hostess. The girl raised the cup and took a sip. Then she noticed that the taste was not at all the same as Wayne's, even though it was the same tea. She even thought that she should have asked Wayne to teach her how to brew it. At that moment, Alan also took a sip of tea, and Lacey immediately admitted that the drink wasn't very good. But the young farmer looked up at her and said that it was delicious. This surprised the girl. She said that when her friend brewed tea, it tasted completely different, to which the boy replied that he liked it just the way it was. Lacey agrees and thanks him, but she promises that next time she will brew it better, because this drink is even tastier. The farmer replies that he will look forward to it. He also agrees that the tea is probably expensive and that this is the first time he has ever tasted such an aroma. Lacey hadn't even thought about it, but it was Chelanite County's signature tea. In addition, Alan noticed that her tea set was expensive, from which he concluded that Lacey was wealthy, surprising her with this statement. To back up his words, he pointed to her home, because a commoner would not live in such a mansion. The enchantress began to deny it. She explained that the tea had been given to her as a gift and that she had inherited the house by chance. The boy was surprised by such gifts, noting that Lacey must have very generous acquaintances. At the very least, the king could be called generous. The girl also said that the cups were already in the house. Hearing this, the boy looked at the cup, said that if they belonged to the Wellbear family, then their quality was not surprising. The girl was surprised and asked him again who was he talking about. Alan even jumped up from his chair, surprised that the new mistress didn't even know whose house she was living in. Lacey decided to ask who they were, and the boy immediately frowned. He said it would be better if she didn't know, but it was too late now. The girl smiled as she listened to her guest. The young farmer sighed, and he began to tell her about the disappearance of the former owners, the Wellbear couple, and how there had been many owners of the house since then, but they didn't stay long. Lacey asked if they had run away. The boy answered in the affirmative, looking even more gloomy. The kitchen also darkened. It started to rain outside. According to the locals, the ghosts of the old residents appear in the house. The rain intensified slightly. The girl was slightly confused by these new details about the history of her new home and asked the storyteller again about the ghosts of the former owners of the house. He confirmed this, explaining that they were a married couple of merchants. Initially, they had a regular store selling various small items, but their lives were greatly changed by the feather of a magical beast. The boy began to remember how he first saw it. His mother showed it to him, saying it was a cockatrice feather. Alan was much younger then and did not know about such a beast. So his mother told him about this magical bird with a snake instead of tail. And Mr. Wellbear recently started trading in the feathers of this bird. Brooches and hair ornaments made with these feathers are highly prized by the knowledgeable and wealthy, so she began to help with the work. She was working on hair ornaments, which the boy also learned about by asking his mother, clinging to her hand. Cockatrices usually look like white chickens, but these feathers shone like burning gold. Because of their value, they were especially prized and brought great prosperity to the village, and the merchants were able to build themselves this huge house where the boys are now talking. Many benefited from this, and it was all thanks to the Welbear family. In the capital, Plume even began to be called the village of feathered decorations. The residents even decided to rename the settlement and hung the new name on the gate, but the joy did not last long. Soon, the supply of golden feathers stopped. After all, Mr. Welbear was in charge of the supply. After the couple fled, production stalled, and only the name remained from the past. And as Lacey added, the house. Alan continues, saying that the mansion is nice. There were many who wanted to get it, and there were quite a few thieves, but they all ran away. And then rumors began to spread in the village that the merchants did not run away, but died in the house, and now the mansion is cursed. With these words, the young man created a creepy atmosphere, but Lacey remained unperturbed, listening with curiosity and sipping her tea. Even when her guest told her about the voices that, according to the same rumors, could be heard deep inside the house. Alan noticed that the atmosphere had changed since Lacey moved here, but he asked if she had heard any strange noises. She replied that she had not. A real thunderstorm began outside, and just as the boy began to say that rumors were just rumors and that the villagers might have simply made them up, lightning flashed outside the window, illuminating the room. The boy screamed, jumping up from his chair again. He pointed behind Lacey, but when she turned around, there was only a wall. The young man clutched his chest, still in terror, claiming that he had seen a black man there, that people's speculations were true, and that they needed to run. The girl remained silent. Then she turned to the guest, who was still shaken by the scare, asking if it was his own shadow. It gradually dawned on him that it was his own shadow, cast on him from behind by the lightning. Alan soon ran home, promising to come back, and added that Lacey should come to the village if anything happened. He also remembered that he had forgotten to bring her a bow. The sorceress waved him goodbye. She closed the door. She turned around. She approached the stairs, deciding that if there was anything in the house, it was on the second floor and needed to be checked. She enlarged her staff. The girl remembered Wayne's words about the stagnant air and decided that they were talking about the ghosts of the couple. Most likely it was some kind of undead or spirits. Such creatures simply linger nearby and exert a bad influence, appearing very scary. And if a curse is placed on a witch, she will not be able to remove it. But if the inhabitants of the house are defeated before that, there will be no problems and they don't seem so scary. Lacey moves through the second floor, lighting the way with magic. She remembers that while cleaning, she found a locked door. She enters one of the rooms. She began to search, looking around the abandoned room with boxes, scrolls, and candles. Her attention is drawn to a bookshelf, from behind which she hears an indistinct sound, like a voice. The girl approaches the shelf, touches it with her hand, realizing that the door is hidden by a magical device, which means that there is definitely something behind it. She casts a spell. Lacey manages to push apart the shelves, behind which there really is a door. With another spell, she unlocks the door and goes inside. Dust or smoke flew at her, forcing Lacey to cover her mouth and nose with her hand. But when everything settled down, she could see a bird sitting on the floor. It was chained by its paw. It was the one making those strange noises. The witch looks more closely. She saw brown feathers with flecks of gold on her find. The sorceress assumed that this was the golden cockatrice Alan had told her about, except that there was no snake tail in sight. The girl looked at the magic door, which provided double protection. Then she looks back at the bird in chains. It had no food or water, and unsurprisingly, it was angry. It turns out that it had been about 3 or 4 years since the Welbear couple disappeared, and all this time the magical beast had been kept chained here. Such creatures are usually more resilient than ordinary ones, but she couldn't believe that cockatrices could be so tenacious. Although, if it was a mutated specimen, its life energy might be higher. While she was thinking, the bird, which had been glaring at her all this time, ruffled its feathers, lost the last of its strength, and slumped down. Lacey knelt down on one knee in front of it, apologizing. She said she would only remove the chain and that the feathered creature needed to remain calm. She reached out her hand to the supposed cockatrice, which looked very sad. But suddenly it began to peck at the witch, which was very painful. The girl said louder that she only wanted to remove the chain, deciding to do it with magic. But when she tried to cast the spell, she was pushed away. It seemed that the chain was enchanted with a spell that suppressed magic. So she had to break the carrier, which she did using her staff. The chain shattered, freeing the magical bird. Lacey rejoiced, but not for long, because her recent prisoner started pecking at her again. The witch asks it to stop. Then she threatens that if the cockatrice doesn't stop, she will turn it into roast chicken. Of course, she doesn't get to finish her sentence, as the bird loses consciousness and falls to the floor, feet up. Because of this, the girl already decided that the magical beast was dead. But upon closer inspection, it turned out that it was breathing and trembling. The bird also did not respond to touch. Upon examination, Lacey discovered traces of trimming on the flight feathers. She remembered Wayne talking about the musty air, and Alan about the changed atmosphere. Numerous seals and barriers, all for the sake of keeping the cockatrice. Inadvertently, she even drew a parallel with herself. The bird was kept locked up. Its feathers were plucked while it was still alive, and then it was thrown into a dark room. All the malice and hatred of the unfortunate creature eventually permeated the entire house. Lacey touched the bird's neck with her fingers. It was still raining heavily outside. The girl picked up the magical beast and held it close to her, feeling that its breathing was very weak. She understood that if this continued, the cockatrice would die. She tried to figure out what to do about it. To be continued. Thanks for watching. Write your feedback in the comments. If you like the story, please like and subscribe. See you soon.